welcome back to another thrilling episode of Adventuring Academy. I'm your humble Dungeon Master, Brennan Mulligan. This is the podcast where we talk about all things tabletop and how to run amazing games at your table for your friends. Our guest today, oh my goodness, are we so delighted to have this luminary, this visionary, this genius. You know him as the Dungeon Master of Join the Party, the head of creative at Multitude Productions. He is the creator and host of the podcast Next Stop, an audio 90s style sitcom, and What's Your Favorite Pokemon? And then I Say Something Nice About You, a podcast about finding excuses to give your friends compliments. He is also the co-author of No Capes, a D&D ready skinning and superhero guide, and Clear Eyes / Full Heart, a GM-less TTRPG about high school football and drama. My friend and yours, Mr. Eric Silver!
Ba, 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 ba. Sorry, I'm sorry. Oh, I didn't have my right. That was so delightful. I loved that so much. That was so good. Thank you so much. Now I'm gonna be a little nicer when I come at you about being mean to Greenpoint.
Mean to Greenpoint, a lovely and delightful neighborhood. Again, nobody gets to live in every single neighborhood in New York City. Greenpoint, one of the neighborhoods I have actually lived in. I have no ill will in my heart towards your beautiful and wonderful neighborhood of Greenpoint. And whatever could I have done?
I was just so ready. So after Unsleeping City 1, I was just like, all right, everyone, the things they know about Greenpoint: crime, Lugosh. That's it. And I'm like, all right, I guess that's how people know Greenpoint. That's where all the bakeries are. And then Unsleeping City 2 comes in. I'm like, great, Greenpoint representation. There's families. And then I'm like, oh, still more crime. Still lying to people on the Upper East Side and going back to Greenpoint.
Noted LGBT ally Dr. Lugosh Primyitsky, one of the most golden-hearted and heroic characters. Also, I'm not sure that criminality in a nation with laws as corrupt and ill-fated as the United States of America, some would wear that with a badge of honor. But I take your point. I love it. It's actually good because now people won't go to the bakeries I like because they're like, oh no, Lugosh is there. I don't want to go. He'll blow my tits off. I don't want to go there. Get a fucking croissant. Like, I don't want to go to Greenpoint. Truly, there was right around the corner from where I lived in Greenpoint. I think it's called The Standard. It was a coffee shop that did the best blueberry muffin I've ever had. And they also were the first place, this was many years ago at this point, that had those tip jars that use pop culture to elicit tips out of you, where it's like Batman versus Superman, who wins? And there's two little tip jar cups and you're voting with your dollar. And I was like, this is wild, the degree to which this is working. Like swarming huge amounts of tips for the baristas at this place by like invoking pop culture tribalism. I was like, this is shrewd. This is very, very smart.
Point, baby. Taking money however we can. In the podcast studio, that's how we do it.
Criminals, and none more than the podcasters. And by the way, for people that don't know, Greenpoint also the hub of Kickstarter headquarters, which is the same block as Multitude, correct?
That's right. We're like around the corner. Kickstarter has like a really beautiful building and is very large because they're a very large tech company. And then like we're in the old, so these are all old pencil factories. So like we have like a room that's in a pencil factory and we like retrofitted it to put this podcast studio in there, and that's where Multitude offices are. But I love the idea that like someone in like the 1800s was like making an eraser, and I'm also like, oh, I wish I could make this edit work. And like it's the same amount of work, obviously.
Well, it's that part of Greenpoint is so beautiful, and like a lot of that waterfront in Brooklyn, where you're talking about like old factories, there's old industrial stuff that's there. The Kickstarter building, which one of the most beautiful, there is a library there with like these high windows and this wild banquet table that I got to play D&D at a couple times with mutual friend Taylor Moore, who's the head of Fortunate Horse, which produces Rude Tales of Magic, which is, we've had Branson Reese on the show. The community is very small. There's a bunch of cool people working in it, but that building is extraordinary, and Greenpoint is, of course, a lush, beautiful, vibrant neighborhood with also some notable rooftop bars and a very good club dancing scene. My old UCB friends Josh Sharp and Ryan Haney used to go out dancing in Greenpoint almost every night of the week.
I love that. That's great. Listen, I'm just saying, Greenpoint is great. Also, you can come to the Multitude Studio and you can see all my dice. I'll show you all the dice that I have. I have my little friend Chad here. My little Funko Pop, who I love, who watches me DM. So listen, I'll show you cool things at the Multitude office, but only once it's safe. Only then can you come unannounced to my office.
Incredible. Speaking of your office, let's talk a little bit about your work. Let's talk about Join the Party, and the thing we share most in common, I think, as creators, as Dungeon Masters, which is taking this game of high fantasy and going, how do we put this in New York State? And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. But talk to me a little bit about like your history with tabletop role playing, and where were the first moments in your kind of biography of tabletop where you started to like experiment with the form and go, actually, I'm going to do whatever I want with this?
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of funny. I came to tabletop role playing games relatively late. I only found them like a few years ago, once 5th edition was up and running. I feel like the way that I found it was the Adventure Zone. Retroactively, I'm like high-fiving Griffin. Like, imagine I'm reaching through time and high-fiving Griffin because of that. So I was introduced to D&D with the Adventure Zone, and then I'm just like, I really want to play some D&D. And this is only when they were on balance. This was like a bunch of years ago. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I would really love to do this. I mean, I'm a big nerd. I like storytelling. Like, I was a camp counselor for so many years. And
Shout out camp.
Shout out camp. Mine was Jewish summer camp, so it might be a little different than yours.
Mine was hippie LARPing, yeah, for sure.
So mine was explicitly people should make out, and yours would like only make out if it makes sense for the story. Listen,
people did make out in character, and I'll leave it at that.
And we also made out in character, which means the expectations of Jewish people for the people to continue, and you have to meet at summer camp. But you know, like all of the traditions of a summer camp counselor, I went to summer camp as a camper for like 12 years, and then I was a counselor for 4, and then head staff for 1 of those. And I was always for like the 15 and 16-year-olds, which are the oldest, and that's where like the I don't want to say cultish, but like, you know, if you went to summer camp, but like, you know, all the ritualistic stuff that happens around there. And there was something that was called that you would do on Friday nights, called There Once Was a Wizard, which is like you would tell this story because everyone was assembled because there's a lot of celebration because it's Shabbat, and we're all going to like sing and dance after we ate all of this chicken and brownies, and it was delicious. And then you do all this, and there's this story, and you would tell this story about this wizard that went all around, that went to China, that went to Russia, that went to Brooklyn once. And I always thought that was funny because this was in Toronto because my dad used to go there. He's from Erie, Pennsylvania, which I always call just like right in between Pittsburgh and Cleveland, which means it's nowhere. And and so it's like he would go up to the Canadian one. So I'm just like, you're talking about Brooklyn. I love that. And then, of course, there's a big screaming moment. There's just like, and then he came to Camp Ramah to come and get some Ruach, which is like the energy you have. And it's just like 14, 15, 16-year-olds screaming at the top of their lungs around you. And like my job was to do that story for 2 summers in a row. And I was just like, great honor, but I was also doing it. And I loved making like people scream around me for, you know, because like, I don't know if you have this feeling, but like, do you also love attention? Do you?
No, I've made choices in my life to avoid attention wherever possible, which is why I'm on the 100th episode of the, you know, vodcast about the actual play show with the Talkback series. No, it's like you're saying, it's a bizarre, there is no way to do this kind of work without, at the very least, having comfort with attention. And I mean, I'm sure you know this is because you work in podcasting, which has, you know, like the polishing and the editing. When I I am one of the executive producers of Dimension 20. I watch the edits of the show. I remember having nausea around like watching myself talk in season 1. Baby, that's gone now. I like seeing my face jabbering on like that. I just killed those embarrassment nerves dead after what 6-7 seasons of the show. Now just watching my own face talk, I'm like, oh, there's that again. Like yeah. Being the center of attention is something that you just find ways of making yourself accept when you are interested in performance and storytelling.
Right, and it's like you do it because it's very funny. It's just like being a dungeon master. I was also a high school English teacher for a while. Like I got certified and everything. I did it for a year. So like being in front of people because that's your job and it's best for everyone is like such a thing I understand. Because like, your teacher is supposed to be the person who's teaching you things, but they're the ones who talk the most in a classroom, right? Which is similar to how I feel to dungeon mastering, which I felt about being a camp counselor in the same way, is like, I'll take this position because I like to talk and I think I talk pretty okay. So like, I'll take this responsibility of being in front of you and allowing other people to judge you, to judge me when I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. It feels like a job in the way that the dungeon master's job is to do this while players do this. I found like so many parallels between dungeon mastering and like my camp counselor and teaching careers. So
man, is that refreshing to hear. I realized recently that every single job I've ever had has involved, I don't know if parasocial relationship is the right term for all these, but I kind of think it works of like actual play dungeon master, like improviser, performer. And before that, even before I was doing creative stuff, I was a bartender and a camp counselor, which even though those are very different industries, it still is a weird thing where it's like, I am getting paid to have a weird kind of relationship with people. When you're a bartender might be the worst offender in terms of parasocial relationship weirdness of like, hey, I'm your friend, and also I may kick you out of here later. Like this. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. There's that weird navigating of like, in all of those, camp counselor, bartender, dungeon master, there is this element of I am going to have a relationship with a group of people in which I think as a person, you want to remove hierarchy from that as much as possible. Obviously, camp counselor, there's just hierarchy inherent in that you're an adult, you're children. And then with bartender, there's a hierarchy in that you're a customer, but I am like a representative of the business and its interests here. But you're trying to remove that hierarchy where and when you can, but there's still the idea of the singular and the many. Like, I'm doing a job that's for one person to do, and I'm relating to a group of people that share a common denominator. You're the kids at the camp, you're the patrons at the bar.
I think maybe an easier way, I like what you just said about hegemony. You are, this is giving the speech at a wedding. Because you are just a guest. Maybe you're the maid of honor, maybe you're the best man. But you're really all the same, and the only person, you are doing this for the bride and groom. And you're like, I want you to have a special day. I'm going to do the thing I'm good at, which is making a speech, talking in front of people, making you laugh, making everybody laugh. And I'm going to do it. I find that it's like such a responsibility that like I'm going to crush it for you on your special day, which is similarly how I feel about dungeon mastering. Is like, I'm going to crush it for you on your special day because you put 2 hours aside and we need to go into our hot studios and record.
The relationship, it's so, talking about hegemony and hierarchy and all that stuff, there is a weird, like, the culture of Dungeons and Dragons is such a weird thing to talk about, because I feel like the idea of the game having a culture is something that has gotten truer as the internet and media and other things. Like, for example, my exposure to, like, I remember playing D&D as a kid and watching the only media reference to D&D players be like a comic book guy on The Simpsons. Yeah. And having that dissonance of like, well, that's nothing like what me and my friends are little hippie kid storytellers. that doesn't resonate with me at all. But knowing that was the cult, like the war gamer kind of culture, and the gatekeeping experiences lots of people had at their local gaming stores of like being people outside of that very specific mold trying to get into the game. But there is an element as the game has progressed of that, like the culture or hegemony around it changing, where suddenly it's like, oh, who does this game belong to? Who is allowed to play it? And I think that like there are some hoary, crusty, old, bad things from the before days of like the dungeon master and like the adversarial kind of like, which is so funny to me because the idea of the dungeon master being an authoritative position is so fundamentally bananas. There's nothing stopping you from dropping 100 dragons on the adventuring party. If this relationship were adversarial, you could just win. Like it
would kill you because you said something rude to my NPC. You say, well, I don't actually need your authority to a guard. And the guard says, well, I have a gun. And then he shoots you in the face and you're dead.
Like that's the thing is when I hear the horror stories of the adversarial dungeon master, part of there you have the initial reaction, which is like, oh, how rude, how mean, how cruel, how unnecessary. And then you go like, how? And then there's another part of me that goes like, if you were adversarial, how did the game even start? Like, why didn't you just kill them right away? Like, in other words, the structure of this is so clearly a role of service. Like, the way I feel running a game of Dungeons and Dragons is the exact same way I feel preparing dinner for a group of friends.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, I did some work ahead of time. There might be a little like round of applause for me as the dinner is served. But fundamentally, the point is I did work because I love my friends and I wanted everyone to have a good time.
And similarly to me dungeon mastering, during the meal, I'll make eye contact with all of them and being like, are you enjoying this? How do you, the peas, I spent a lot, here's the secret about the peas, is that I found them. I went to a market a few miles away and that's where I got them. Do you like it?
Do you like it? Do you like this?
Tell me that you can say it with your mouth.
I noticed what you're not eating. Yeah, and again, like a lot of dinners that I have made, the thing I spent the most time on gets smashed on the floor, and whatever the side dish was becomes the focus of the meal ad infinitum. And usually,
the name of this is it's potatoes. Got to make more of these, man.
These are so good. We love these, and we love it because we can tell it wasn't the main thing you worked on.
What is this ketchup? So good, Brennan. Oh my god. Thank you. Oh my god. I would love to say something just about you said about the crusty hegemony in this, because this is something that I've been pushing on quite a lot. So like really short version of the other thing is that like I found it, I wanted to make a D&D podcast. That was always what it came down to. I was podcast adjacent. Join the Party was my first one. I got like a group of people together, which then became Multitude, which is our podcast collective and production studio, which now is like my full-time job. And we have, I'm like counting the pictures of the podcast over there. We have like 11 shows. A bunch of them are partners. Like we're a part of a collective. Everyone owns their IP, and it's so much fun. And everything I learned was making this D&D podcast. So, but the D&D podcast is like you look at the things that are done that are as fantasy and the fantasy genre, and then you're like, oh wait, this isn't me at all. I find like, hey, Brennan, this is going to be wild to maybe some of you who've lived in the state of New York. I am a Jewish person. I'm Jewish. This is what it looks like. And like so much lately after being encompassed in D&D stuff is like, oh man, you guys just mean Christianity, don't you? Like this is all just filled in Christianity in so many ways. And like it really it's really been irking me. And especially like, all right, well, let's try to remove the fantasy thing from there. And now in campaign 2 of Join the Party, we're doing a modern like magic realism, like superhero sort of thing, where a small town in upstate New York then becomes a metropolis the size of Portland because of discovering a new element, diaphragm, which makes delta radiation, which is one better than gamma radiation. Sucked at Incredible Hulk. And it gave people superpowers in that way. And like by ripping it off, I'm like, okay, let's live in this world, and then we can tackle these things, which is similar to what you're doing with Unsleeping City. It's funny, like you're doing Unsleeping City, and that's magic realism version of this, and like we're trying to do like the superhero version of that. You rip it off and you put a New York State thing on top of it instead. And it's just like, if we're gonna tackle this shit, I want to do it in the real world and not do it like when we're also trying to get mixed up with like orcs and goblins and what does it mean for something to be a monster. There's like that Terry Pratchett quote that's like, well, the humans laid down their arms because it was like black and white did not fight anymore because it was so much easier to kill green instead. And like that's something that I'm like, oh yeah, like that's what fantasy is usually for, is making a metaphor. But like, welcome to 2021, man. Like we don't need the metaphor. It's literally on our doorstep. So it's trying to do something that is more here. And like that's just engaging with that as well. And it's really difficult to take apart the crusty stuff because so many people have latched onto it and be like, this is my crust. No, this is my crust. You can't have my crust. This is what it's supposed to be.
Oh, I mean, you're not kidding. I mean, like, that's the thing is I remember being a teenager and someone pointing out for the first time that The Hobbit didn't have a single woman in it. Mm-hmm. And being like, that doesn't strike you as weird? They walked across a whole continent and there wasn't one woman in the whole place. And it's shocking when you realize the things you love carry all this venom inside of them, and like confronting those hedges. And like you're saying, you know, there's this horrifying thing where you have voices of like a real need for justice, and these voices are not saying like, I'm here to ruin the thing you like. They're saying like, hey, this thing you like harms real people today in the real world. And you know, and trying to commit yourself to doing a better story than was done before, but at the same time, while knowing that your entire mythic imagination has this architecture that was built by the shit that has the problems in it to begin with. So you're like, I got to go back on all these reflexes that were trained in the bad hegemony, right? I want to talk about Join the Party. First of all, I'm like, oh, you said a million things that all deserve an hour-long podcast.
It's our fault for getting on summer camp. This is what happens when people go to summer camp. We're like, can we talk about this now? Can we do that? That's on both of us.
First of all, I want to say that superhero modern, like that is so awesome and cool and badass, and I love it. And like you're saying, speaking of specifically being a Jewish game master, superheroes, a uniquely Jewish contribution to American mythology.
Exactly. That's why I'm like, we're doing superheroes so that I can canonically punch Nazis, and that's in tradition. Like, that's why I want it.
In tradition, like there are few things mythologically that you can point, like where myths originate from in like the ancient past is a conversation that has to do with levels of archaeology and sociology and anthropology that truly stagger the imagination. Superheroes aren't like that. We can point to the two people that made them up, right? Joe Shuster, Jerry Siegel, Superman, Action Comics, lifting the car over his head. And I think that's a incredible legacy. And man, let me know if a spot opens up and you want me to come play.
Brennan, I would love that. But like, we've only met like 3 times, and now I can do this now.
I have like, it's very fun. It's like you, Abria Iyengar, a couple people that I'm like, I love this person. I have seen them only in screens on a computer because we live in a wild pandemic world. But a day is coming where you and I will get to throw dice in person. I wanted to talk as well, talking about hegemony, talking about these other issues, about your article and about publishing that, specifically talking about anti-Semitism within the canonical, kind of like the Western canon of fantasy texts, and not just the old school stuff. The recent, like I think it's very well documented in Harry Potter and the instances of it that arrive in D&D. Talk a little bit about the article, its genesis, and like how it's been, like what the response to it has been.
Okay. I 2020 has been a time that I've wanted to be as outwardly Jewish as possible because of you know, the everything, the rise of literal actual Nazis and all of that stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to do this. This is something I've been reckoning with quite a lot lately. And like, I'm really glad that someone who loves J.R.R. Tolkien as much as you do, that like I can say this to you, is like, here's the thing, man. Like, the dwarves in The Hobbit are literally explicitly Jews. Like,
yes.
He said that in an interview with the BBC. He said, like, love that language. They're so warlike. They're stubborn. Love those guys. I knew a bunch of them in World War I. It was tight. And he also said it in a positive way. Whereas, like, they're you know, people underestimate them. We love them. Like, that was that interview. But like, hey, you don't get to like take my people and turn it into a race in your story that then became, and you don't get to do that. So that's one. The second thing is then like everything we know about fantasy has been encased in carbonite. See what I did? I went over two different genres at the same time because the nerd thinks that I said carbonite is that now everything that is in The Hobbit and then in Lord of the Rings is now that's what fantasy is. And like if we're moving past what happened in like before World War II and we're not going to reckon with these things, well, we're going to have holdovers. Like Dungeons and Dragons TSR was sued by the Tolkien estate because their shit was too close to Lord of the Rings because they literally used the word Hobbit. Like it's too close. So we know canonically for a fact that this was taken from this.
Yeah.
Wizard of the Coast has maintained that. Maybe they've scrubbed some things down. Maybe they've sanded it off in the way that you do over time, but like that, those guts are still there. So like the dwarves, as you understand them in The Hobbit, and as we understand Gimli, that's what a dwarf is. Those dwarves are the same. And like if that dwarf originally was a Jew, you don't get to just keep doing that dwarf over and over and over again and publish that in your book and keep publishing it and then sell it. Like that is inherently the problem. That's in your book that you are saying is canonical Dungeons and Dragons. As a Jewish dungeon master myself, I know that you do things at the table because everyone does things at the table to accommodate for the story that they're telling, and that like good, you should do that. But like the fact that you are putting that on the player to deal with, and that a Jewish player needs to deal with that as a dwarf every single time, then like that sucks, man. Like that you're making money that's canonically in there is a real bummer. They also like liches was invented by Gary Gygax, which is even stickier. And like the place that a lich keeps their soul is like tefillin, which for those of you who don't know is like, I don't know if you've seen photos of Jews with like a box in their head and a box in their arm. That's like part of mourning prayers for Jews. It's called tefillin. Like that's what the original description of a lich is, where a lich kept their soul was. It's a box that has religious stuff, religious writing in, and you keep it in there. I'm like, that's really weird, especially because like Gary Gygax was someone who like took a lot of interest in studying religions and like was super into that stuff. So like you must have known, my man, when you invented this thing.
Yeah, and like in full transparency, this is like the reason I hope everyone reads the article is this is shit that I have learned like in the past year or two. Like even in earlier seasons of Dimension 20, we had like a pavement golem, which now I would never refer. It would be a construct or an automaton. Even using the term phylactery in my head, I was like, if you even, and again, this is not just like little teenage Brennan. This is like 20s Brennan being like, oh yeah, phylactery. That's the thing a lich keeps their soul in. It's the Horcrux, right? And we can get into J.K. Rowling and all that. But the point being, like, it is mortifying to know that you have ingested all of this poison through these channels and through the culture and through the hegemony that you were raised in. And it's a huge service and a generosity on your part to like write articles like this that hopefully allow people to change their storytelling to not replicate these harmful things. I know myself being one of them.
I want to commend you. I want to commend you on it because like this is like shout out to the the name of your consultant escapes me. I followed him on Twitter and he's
Manish Dana on Twitter, who is one of the most like brilliant, incredible Orthodox Black rabbi. Just like one of the most incredibly insightful, golden-hearted just incredibly funny, and every bit of consulting that he did on the show was like a true blessing and an honor for the show. It was a very special. We've worked with a lot of consultants, and he is like one of my favorite people I've ever gotten a chance to talk to.
He sounds incredible. I followed him on Twitter. It's an incredible follow. But like, man, when fucking when Lou was like, I want to look in his mouth, and then Kingston did, and like the Jewish letters were in there, I was like, haha, finally, one time, man. That's the real Golem. And like Willie lives in Williamsburg, for God's sakes. Like, oh my God. It was such a moment, because I've never seen that before outside of me trying to do more intentional stuff in my own work. Like, I've never seen it portrayed in Dungeons and Dragons, or like even fantasy or genre. Like, there are very few Jews out there that are like representative stuff, or the Jewish mythology is taken as such. And it's just like, it's you wouldn't know, because if you read a monster manual, you think a golem is just a construct. And like, that's what really bums me out, is that like we know that Dungeons and Dragons grabs from random shit and throws in their monster manual and calls your mythology or the thing that you love a monster. But like, man, you really sanded this one down, didn't you? You also, like, the skin golem isn't even Frankenstein, which is actually a golem, which like Mary Shelley was actually dealing with that, and that's not what it was. Like, that one really bummed me out the most, about like those three examples were really getting on me. And it really did feel like a piece of service journalism, in the way that like, hey, y'all know this exists, right? And I feel like, shout out to all of the people in 2020 who were like, you know, this exists, right? Like the Asian folk who said that Oriental adventure still existed, and all of the work, that's just one that came to my mind, but all the work of pushing on those things, and like Romani people being examined in Curse of Strahd. But like, I didn't see one explicitly for Jews, and I'm like, I want to do this as a piece of service journalism, which is out there.
It's an incredible work of service journalism, and hopefully people read it, are cognizant of all the things that are being laid out here, of like the explicit way in which dwarves were modeled after Jews in Middle Earth, of, you know, like, there are some things that I think are more widely spread, where it's like the goblins in Harry Potter, because of the widespread nature of that's been like documented more. And there are so many other nefarious things, like the phylactery thing, like all of this that go to these deep places and say this fantasy is not welcoming to everybody. Its focus is so much more narrow than you can understand, unless you take the time to seek out articles like this, unless you take the time to look at the journalism that's being done. You know, sorry, go for it.
No, I appreciate that. And there's something, just because you're sitting in front of me and you understand, is like, I want to talk, like, in A Crown of Candy, I had to turn to my partner, Amanda, who is Catholic, and who has known my DMing style. She was one of the players on Join the Party. And I'm like, hey, what's a heterodoxy? Like, what? Like, can you help me? Like, what's a pontifex? Can you help me? Like, that is not, I'm not being like, oh, ringing the bell, let's go fucking get Brennan. But like, that is a fantasy trope. And A Crown of Candy explicitly played in the Game of Thrones fantasy tropes. But it's like, the fact that there is a bad church is also just like the fact that a church exists. And like, that is just something that's tough. And then I'm like, oh, there's a crusade. No, wait, I know what part this with the crusade. And it's like, I know what you were doing there, be that you're playing in fantasy tropes and you're deconstructing this Game of Thrones shit. But I'm also just like, I hate that this is just in fantasy. That like, we assume that their Christian heaven and Christian hell are the defaults. That like, every place has a church, which is the capital C church. And like, really trying to take apart those things. I was trying to do it, and at least I'm going to do it in a modern world, where the only thing that's different is that like, we jumped forward 30 years and there are superheroes. Like, that's the thing I'm trying to struggle with, because there's so much to do.
Yeah. I mean, homie, I'm like, I am right there with you in terms it's so funny, because like you're saying, like, it is a part of the hegemony to include this Catholic Church, when in reality, like, I was raised on pagan stories, like Irish, Celtic, old school. I went to Beltane festivals growing up. So to me, with Catholic cousins, like Irish Catholic cousins, I have never been baptized, let alone confirmation, let alone any of that other shit.
Either. Fuck yeah, dude.
Fuck yeah, right? Like I found out recently from my dad that like my Irish Catholic grandmother like wept and wept because they wouldn't baptize me, and so. But what's so funny is, regardless of the alternative ways in which I was raised, the degree to which I default to heaven and hell, when I think back on it, I go like, is that Christian? Is that the Catholicism I didn't get raised in, or is that straight up Looney Tunes? Right. Because the earliest memories I have are you get shot, angel, harp, halo, you shoot up. That's cartoons, baby. Like, it's so pernicious and insidious, and there is a wild degree to which, even when you assume that you maybe have escaped certain parts of it, how much have you really escaped them?
Honestly, though, it's just restrictive. When we're talking about D&D as a storytelling game, you're like, oh, here's the thing, man. Angels need to come down when you die. Sorry, man. Like, that's regardless of the story, regardless of your world that you've been homebrewing for 10 years and like that it lays in a totally different plane of existence, gotta have angels, gotta have St. Peter. Like, sorry. And I think it is the thing that holds us down. Like, once again, I am not excoriating you for this. It is wild to think that this is just everywhere, especially in the United States. The things that we take American and Christian, when you think about like just ideas of morality and like what we assume, and like shout out to our government and all that fun stuff, is like those two things are so interchangeable. And like when it is handcuffing us to the thing that we think we understand about our world, and it's just like, it's tough. The worst thing about this is that like we're trying to exist in a world that doesn't exist, and we are still shackled to the ideas of Christianity in the United States, which is just like, I would love, like, everyone, let's all do something different. Like, also, here's a really funny joke. Just whenever you say heaven and hell, just say Christian heaven and hell. And it's just like, it's instantly funnier. Just like, oh man, my cat died. Went right to Christian heaven. Good cat.
He went straight to Christian cat heaven. I mean, like you're saying, it is something that has been like, I am very, again, I say it would be wrong to say I'm very aware of it. I struggle to be more aware of it every day that I can, because the roots go so deep. And it's this wild thing of like, I can count on one hand the amount of times I went to church as a child, almost exclusively for a cousin's whatever, right? Like an extended family function. And the degree to which, like, oh, but we celebrate Christmas because Christmas is secular, theoretically. Like that idea of like, oh, well, Christmas is just like a tree and food and Nat King Cole. Christmas is not XYZ other thing,
Here's something wild that I learned from watching Defunct Land, like, that YouTube series about like roller coasters, but also they do like cartoons and TV shows sometimes. Mm-hmm. There is a Christmas episode of Buzz Lightyear in Star Command, where Buzz Lightyear finds Space Santa and he drives his sleigh. Like, why did you do that? Like, there's no reason for you to do that. Obviously, I know there's a reason why they wanted there to be a Christmas episode. You're playing to America, blah, blah, blah. But, like, there's no reason why Santa needed to exist in Buzz Lightyear Star Command universe. Like, unless you're writing an incredible Christmas AU, I just don't understand why this is here.
So I think that what is interesting to me about like you're saying, like, why do the realms of our farthest imagination need to constantly come back to this dipping to the same well? So here's the interesting like thought experiment, or maybe just like the puzzle of moving forward. What does a better version of storytelling look like? Is it imposing on our cultural storytelling, which D&D or not is largely controlled by companies? Right. We are talking on a podcast produced by a company right now. We're a very small company. I think we try to do the right thing where and when we can, but talk about big tentpole blockbusters, talk about Disney and all the IP they own, talk about podcast networks and studios, talk about D&D and Wizards of the Coast. Is the goal to push these institutions, which we already understand are these large corporate institutions to make their storytelling more inclusive. Like what? Like in other words, and I'm not putting this on you as like, Eric, you seem to have a big problem. How the hell do you propose we fix it? I mean, genuinely, because it racks my brain and keeps me up at night. Like, is the answer a less Eurocentric, Christian-centric Dungeons and Dragons, or is it a different new game? If it's a different new game, how do we feel about different people playing that game? If it's a new like and again, I say all this with the understanding of like, this is the conversation. Hopefully there is an answer somewhere here, but obviously it's a journey and it's complex to arrive at the right answer.
I think it's about having a critical eye, just being aware of it, and then it's like, is this the story you, Dungeon Master, at your table want to tell? Mm-hmm. And like, then so that's on the smallest level, just like Dungeon Masters being aware, more people of all different types of creeds and credos being the Dungeon Master, being the one who makes the world, and then hearing if someone is like, this makes me feel a type of way. The biggest problem I have is still just like the fact that this is published in books that you can buy and sell. And like, yeah, change some of the stuff in the book that everyone buys and thinks, when you think of it as gospel, and when it does, and you don't put that critical eye to it, then you have a problem. I do think it's about moving Dungeons and Dragons to a better place. But like, Dungeons and Dragons is really good at like some stuff. Telling a story that is heroic and involves violence of some sort of way. Like, Dungeons & Dragons is the best game system for that. The bones of that is there. I just wish that the published works didn't exclude me. And then it's all, let's all play lots of different games. Dungeons & Dragons is not great at heists. So I love Blades in the Dark. I love Masks, which is about teenagers and young adults becoming superheroes. And it's probably the game that I love the most because it follows form and function, where like the powers don't matter as much as your emotions matter. So it's like everyone should be well-rounded and like being aware of the stuff that you're doing. I just don't like that the book is like, I don't know, that you figure it out. So it's a responsibility both of the company and of the players and the Dungeon Masters together. That's just a tough thing. And like, we do have a responsibility, you and me and the people who make media, that like we are putting this out there for larger consumption because we're allowing people to look at our table. So like doing something interesting and doing something different, which is like even fantasy, the way Fantasy High is different in it's not high fantasy, it's John Hughes, or the way that Unsleeping City is very different, or the way that say the second campaign of Join the Party is different, that we're going to do superheroes and be modern and change it and realize you can change and display that and put your best foot forward. Like, I'm not saying I'm perfect at this stuff, but at least like I'm trying to keep this in mind, and this is what I'm giving you, and I want you to enjoy it. Like, maybe here's the other teacher thing in me. I feel so protective of my listeners that they're getting a good games experience. Like, in the party, we teach in our first 2 episodes of our first campaign, we teach people how to play. Like, inserted into our story, we pop in and be like, hey, we're making a check. A check is when you roll the dice to figure out if an action goes good or bad. Both good rolls and bad rolls are good for storytelling. And then we go out and then we go back into the story. I want them to learn how to play, and I want them to realize that D&D can be, the bones of it can be used in so many different ways. It's not just like someone in a room being like, is this Dungeons and Dragons? Like, that's not what it is, even if that's what's happening in the corporate office of Wizards of the Coast. Like, I just want them to experience that. And like, we're really we have transcripts. We try to be as accessible as possible. We want our audio to sound as good as possible so everyone will have a good time listening to it right from the jump. Like, it's about being intentional now with Dungeons and Dragons media. The thing that I was saying all the way back in the beginning of this conversation is that I heard the Adventure Zone, and I'm like, man, I could do that too. You can make a show and put it out there and be intentional and like and realize what you're doing, the storytelling of what you're doing. And we wanted to do that and join the party right from the jump. And hopefully we're doing that. We did that in campaign 1. I'm being really intentional and really thinking about that stuff in campaign 2. Like, I'm pulling all of my favorite shit from Blades in the Dark and Masks and other Dungeon World and Powered by the Apocalypse games. Like, I'm pulling that in here to try to give someone a really great experience. And I feel that weight when people listen to Join the Party, and I hope they enjoy it. I really want them to enjoy it.
man, I so appreciate your insight, your clear passion for this, and for, like you're saying, like storytelling that is like inclusive and meaningful. And it's so funny to me of like, funny is not the right word. It is so clear that watching negative reactions to calls for things to improve. And even for myself in like, like I feel like most creators, I am always more cognizant of the places that I have failed, or that I let myself down or let other people down. And it's wild to me when people look at these criticisms as coming from anything other than a place of love and disappointment, of like, you could be caring for people better. This could include more people. This could make more people feel welcome. This is only a good thing. All of these criticisms are only a good thing. All of these ways in which we are asking people to improve, which is like, I don't know, man, you get one short human life. It's like, what, do I have a bus to catch? Like, no, I can spend my life just trying to get better. And you got to make your peace with dropping the ball. You got to make your peace with, there will be errors along the way, but if you're not committing yourself at least to the process, it is very like spiriting and moving and inspiring to hear you talk about this, because it's like you're saying, I would just hope that everyone engaging in storytelling, or that has the rare gift to be able to make decisions like the ones you're talking about, would bring the same weight of consideration, care, and kindness that you do.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, man. Listen, the Dimension 20 had made me want to step my fucking game up. Like, it's just like, oh, you can do that? You could do that in Dungeons and Dragons? And it's just like, listen, you're doing the work as well, and I cannot say how nice it was to see the Willie be an actual, real fucking Jewish golem, man. Like, it was, I've never seen it anywhere else. It's like, I'm only saying this to your face because you are right here, and like, then I'm like, hey, remember these fantasy tropes? Wild, because like you're doing the fucking work too, and like I don't appreciate it, like, and that you also understand. And man, I can't believe J.R.R. Tolkien just basically said, no, the dwarves were Jews. They are. Love those fuckers, but they are.
Well, that's the thing. There needs to be, yeah. It's one of the. I mean, I also want to take time to talk about joining the party and everything else. But like you're talking about, it's like how do we like have the seismic shaking of everything? Like that's the funny thing is when you're talking about, it's one thing to have a house where you can actually make the choice of like, the rot in this house is too deep. We're going to knock it down and we're going to build a new house somewhere else. But when you're talking about something like culture, it's like, man, my brain is already shaped by that. I can't even trust my brain. How do we fix this when even the tools we're using to address it are already compromised by the exact problems we're talking about?
Exactly.
It'll keep you up at night, and it'll make you, it'll keep you up at night.
Listen, this is what I was just saying, though. I'd rather do the work. I'm trying to do the work in the game system. Like, listen, I don't work there, but like, I'm playing this game and I'm pulling in all my favorite parts of as many games as possible, and I'm trying to make this creative, this piece of content for you that demonstrated that this can be good. It's like we're trying to influence from the outside. When you're like, hey, you guys are making the books. Could you change this? That'd be nice.
Well, and that's sort of exactly what it is, right? Is you want to see, like, I don't know what's beyond the horizon, but like you're saying, weirdly, it's that thing of like, I want to see the mythic consciousness that is not so dominated by the vision of one mid-century Catholic writer, but in order to, I think the challenge, of course, is in order to do that, you can't have a single author. Like, something that is truly inclusive of everyone needs that, like, you need the authenticity of perspectives from the places you are actually trying to represent. And that requires a mass collaborative effort. Like, even within the things Dimension 20 is doing, like, I we hire consultants. I do as much research as I can, but everything
if you have money, hire consultants. I don't know everything. I've hired consultants. I don't
for
know.
Sure. But I even mean that like the work of a single author is never going to really get the job done. Like anything that I'm solo DMing is always going to be limited by all of just the fact that it's a single point of view. So hopefully whatever the next heroic fantasy thing has 100 authors working on it from all different places that can bring that beauty of perspective that is so sorely lacking. I want to talk about Join the Party. I want to talk about the games you have done. I had so much fun playing with you on our Top of the Rock. So much fun. It was an absolute blast. But I want to talk a little bit about both Join the Party and kind of for our viewers here, the ethos of the show, because you do awesome modern storytelling in it. You're doing really exciting things with D&D, and you've also designed your own games. I want to hear about things like No Capes and Clear Eyes, Full Heart. What is Join the Party? What's the ethos of the show? What are the kind of stories you tell?
Wonderful. Yes. Join the Party was inspired by the boom from the Avenger Zone, knowing that you could make media with this game and trying to be as intentional and be like, let's tell a story we want to see out in the world. And I think that since we were professional podcasters, be like, we're going to edit it, we're going to sound design it, we're going to have the best microphones we can get our hands on. We're going to try our best to be as inclusive in both inclusive to people who've played Dungeons and Dragons before or not, and really get everyone to come together. I think that this is finally coalesced in our second campaign where we're doing this modern storytelling thing. And I have learned so much as a dungeon master that I want everyone's I want to have a collaborative story and I want to have a collaborative world. And this time I wanted to have a conversation about power. We were doing this we started in late 2019, and then everything changed. Things started to change when we started this campaign. And I'm like, I want to do a superhero campaign, and I wanted it to talk about how power and your ability to do if you are given power, what do you do with it? And I think that that's a ripe conversation for storytelling. The way that the world building of Campaign 2 goes is that the small lake town in upstate New York, which is named Lake Town, of course. A mad scientist, Dr. Cassandra Morrow, is working up there, and she discovers a new element, which is called diaphorum. And it explodes in the way that it does in the 80s, and it gets in the water and it gets into people, and then these people are just a little bit better. They're a little bit fitter, and they don't age as much, and they seem okay. And then this thing, and as Dr. Morrow figured out that diaphorum was an energy source and could be used to push technology forward very quickly, within 10, 15 years, 20 years. This small upstate town has turned into a metropolis the size of Portland, and then becomes the capital of New York State. And then we have this tension between Lake Town City, as it now is, and New York City. There's a high-speed rail that connects the two. They have a hockey team. Go Mountain Lobsters. Rah, rah, go Mountain Lobsters. And then we have this superhero thing, because now the people who were infected with the diaphorum the delta rays, the delta radiation, has now passed this on to their children, and they have full-fledged superpowers. And how do we reckon with that when the people before you were just oh yeah, man, I look great for 60, and I look no older than the age of 30. What do you do when you have the power but no one has told you what to do? And I think that's something that we were reckoning with, and we start with immediately. And the way that No Capes is okay, how do we turn D&D classes into superheroes, into superpowers? And the idea of magic or key points if you're a monk, or your ability to fight, or raging as a barbarian, they just call those superpowers in the X-Men. Those are just mutants, my man.
Yeah.
And then grafting that one onto another, Iceman. Iceman's a sorcerer. He has ice powers, and all of his spells are ice powers. And you could talk about Wolverine and his ability to soak up damage. He's a barbarian. And that's when you start figuring those out and making those one-to-one. Jessica Jones is a monk straight up. Luke Cage also a barbarian. I came up with a subclass that was like Nightcrawler, where you're a rogue, but also you have the ability to access all the teleporting powers that are in all the books and stuff. And like when you realize that and that power and magic are interchangeable, then you can start telling your story in this more broken out modern world. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun to do. I love it. We're like in the middle of the campaign right now. It's ramping up. Like things are getting really wild right now. There's like organized crime, and there's corrupt government people, and there are supervillains, and there are rival superhero teams, and it's been really fun. I also really like telling superhero stories outside of the Marvel DC compendium or continuum, because I'm like, I want to play with this, and I'm gonna play with your shit, but like I'm not part of your company. So like I want to tell a more broader story, and like being able to do that with tabletop role playing and with D&D, which still has all like the fighting and the complications and the traps and the heroism. It's been really fun to do. It's been really fun to do on Join the Party.
Incredibly exciting. And again, like you're talking about, it's the kind of story that I feel like superhero storytelling is really meant to tell. It's been a very interesting thing. Like you're saying, we're in an age right now where superhero storytelling is at a certain zenith. Like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, people can feel whatever way they want to about it. It's a pretty wildly compelling thing, at least in the history of like media and storytelling, of like a group of interconnected movies. Like I'm trying to think of the last time like the studio system did something like that. And for again, like people can criticize these movies, and they rightfully should, but part of the reason it's important to criticize them is this is like popular culture is culture. Like people get their understanding of ethics not from the like heights of academia, but rather from like popular culture. It's the stories that stories are the zip files for our culture and values. Like it's how we all agree on like, hey, what are our short condensed bites of life that we draw meaning from, that we go to in these big, mass ways, our TV shows and our movies and our books that explain how we're supposed to be to each other. And superheroes are, there's all these interesting things within that medium of like exploring power, because that's the definition of the thing, is like powers. Like what are you supposed to do with these incredible gifts? When you settle on something like a theme like that, like, hey, superheroes in this world are about we're talking about power as it relates to ethics, and more specifically, how it disconnects. How you have one, now how do I plug this into the other? And is that something you sit down with your players at the table to talk to them about? Is that something that you go over with them? How do you orchestrate your storytelling themes as a dungeon master with your players while maintaining that kind of player and DM agency of they don't necessarily know what's coming down the trail?
Right. Oh, that's such a good question. I think that in campaign 2, I was as honest as possible with them about we had these bigger conversations. We recorded like 4 episodes, 2 where we talked about the world, 1 where we talked about their characters, and then we did like a modified version of A Quiet Year, which I called RPG City Planner, which is where I created a modern city. You take a small town and then you blow it up into a city. And we did it together. Like they were part of the world building and they knew where I was coming from. In the first episode, I was like, these are my values. I definitely want to talk about these things, and this is what I think might happen as we go forward and as we push things, as we move things forward. And then they're like, okay, well, there should be a neighborhood that represents the incredibly quick growth of industry. And I'm like, okay, that's Industry Tin that we put in there. And I'm like, oh, because of that, there needs to be a place where they made housing really, really quickly. That is like kind of shoddy, but like now it's like an affordable place for people to get housing. So we made like a company tin right above Industry Tin. And like then building on top of those things and doing that all together is what happened. I think it's all about saying that from the jump, because you can say your values. That's not going to surprise. That's not going to ruin any surprise that's coming down the pike. I think that's fair. And be like, I want to have a conversation about power, about people not preparing you for this power.
We have blown so far past the time we were supposed to start answering audience questions, and I don't care. I'm having a great time.
Yeah, I'm too, Brennan.
Yay! Truly getting to hang is always such a fucking pleasure, and especially getting deep into the nitty gritty. I'm going to reveal the secret part of my heart. I'm going to reveal an insecurity I have about GMing, and specifically my GMing, and I want to throw it at you.
Is it New York City references that no one else gets? Is that it?
How do I reference more obscure stuff?
I don't remember one sandwich place that doesn't exist anymore, but I loved it.
In Top of the Rock, we went like a full 3 minutes on just pommes frites. So I'm.
But I have to explain what Top of the Rock is. To celebrate Unsleeping City, I had Brennan come on for Join the Party, and we played Sports Are Just Numerology, which was like a wonderful, wonderful one-page tabletop RPG to tell like a sports story. Then we had it set in the Unsleeping City. So we did like a quasi wrestling like Ragnarok fight sort of thing, where like instead of doing like budget meetings, they would just have a wrestling match instead, and we had like 2 wrestlers who would go at each other, and we packed as many New York City references. This bad boy right here can fit so many New York City references.
Beautiful. I miss it so much. Here's the thing I will share.
Sure.
When you are DMing, when you're GMing, when you're storytelling, whatever, any of the many terms that different tabletops use for it, there is a degree to which you are doing multiple things at the same time. Like one of the easy ways to put it is you're a physics engine. Someone's like, I'm going to jump, and you're going to be like, this is how hard the jump is. It's a totally arbitrary call. But you trust me to be some kind of impartial arbiter about this wall's harder to climb than this wall, and I know because I'm going to give you a different number for each one, right? Now, as things move along in complexity, one of the things that I often think about, and this might be the philosophy major in me, is there are physical consequences. I don't have any problem if someone crashes a car being like, you're going to get hurt. You crashed a car. We all know how cars work. As things move from the realm of the physical into the emotional, and then into the like moral and ethical, in those moments of like sharing your values with your players, where you're like, this is the kind of story I'm interested in telling or exploring. One of the things that comes up with me a lot is even my close friends may have a really different read on the morality of this situation. And in that case, how confident do I feel being the moral engine of this universe? Because let's be clear, this made-up world is just in my bad, flawed, fallible brain. And it freaks me out, man. Easy example that straddles the kind of emotional to moral line is spoilers for Fantasy High sophomore year. Kristen keeps a piece of information from her girlfriend Tracker that has to do with Tracker's like surrogate father, her uncle Jawbone, getting cheated on. And I jump into being like, wow, I can't believe Allie wouldn't have Kristen tell Tracker about that. I'm going to enforce a consequence. Tracker's going to get really upset that information was kept from them. And I did it. And then there's a reaction in the moment from Emily and Allie that, again, straddles a line between player and character, where they're like, wow, Tracker really, like Tracker's reaction, like, or just sharing, like, I don't think Tracker's reaction is right. Why should you have to share that information? And all of a sudden, there's this moment where I go, am I the world, or am I just some guy who has a wrong idea about how this should be working?
I have the same issue. I have a character called the Knight of Mirrors, and the Knight of Mirrors rides around on they're a reskinned cavalier, so they ride around on their motorcycle, and they're tight as shit, and they have like reflective armor, and they're like the Knight of Mirrors reflecting back on them, and they're like the Red X I binged all of Teen Titans once I got HBO Max. Finally came to Roku. Shout out to HBO and Roku for working that shit out. Woo! Let's go. So I'm like, so like they're like the Red X. They're not even Batman-ish. It's really just like I'm doing my own thing, regardless if there are people around, and we'll work together. I thought they were just kind of neutral, and like and our characters are just like, yeah, I see them as a friend. It's like, no, I don't trust them. I don't like them at all. And I'm like, I feel like I just need to play the character, because the character has feelings, and like they are the ones who's controlling the narrative, not you morality. Like I feel like I remember when that happened, I'm like, yeah, Tracker would have been super pissed. Like, yeah, you're coming down hard on your friends, but like you kept stuff from Tracker. You're her girlfriend. Of course she's gonna be super upset. That threatens relationships all the time. So like, as the dungeon master, I try to play the character as much as possible. So then the Knight of Mirrors running around being masked and like no one knows anything about them. I'm like, yeah, there's a reason why. Like they don't want to be seen. They don't want any of this stuff. They don't want to be seen. They don't want their identity to be known by anyone. And like sometimes they get the jump on my players, and like they find out because they're also like Batman-ish, and that they're like a super detective in that way, because they're unknown in that way. And I'm like, yeah, at one point I was just like, yeah, sorry, I found out about your secret identities. I really didn't mean it. I really want to keep this professional. Like, I'm really sorry about that. I didn't mean it. So like, it's just like if the Knight of Mirrors is just like, this is a job, other superheroes are also part of that job and occupation. Like, I want to run it like that. Maybe you can say like, this is what my character would do, is the DM's way of being like, this is what the character would do that. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry. I love the Knight of Mirrors. The Knight of Mirrors is my heart.
That sounds so badass. I love that so goddamn much. And yeah, I think you're right. Characters are allowed to have their own inner ethos and compass. So I think that makes sense, right? And I think that it gets one step trickier, I think, because we understand that a lot of stories have morals. And I personally subscribe to the school of thought that a story that isn't attempting to have a moral still has a moral that is just now either subconscious or unintended or a byproduct or whatever. Like there are I don't care who you are. You got values in your work somewhere. You got some values. There are some assumptions about meaning in there.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, listen, I have to play organized crime with some values. Like we're Val, who's our barbarian, who has like some vague, who also has like Val is they them. Val is from Little Italy, and like their dad is a mob person in New York City, and like they're struggling with that. But so like I need to play mobsters with some amount of value. What do mobsters value? They value power and they value family. And like those are things that you need to rely on. I think the thing that really helps me with that is thinking about Blades in the Dark. In that Blades in the Dark, for those of you who don't know, it's about heists, and it's the idea that like you are one faction within tons of factions in a city. And remembering that people do things when you're not there is the most helpful thing for being a dungeon master to me. That like things happen because you did something, but also because you didn't do something.
Yeah.
And check on this. And I think that's what happens. It's not about morality. It's about the values you have instilled into your world, and people who you are controlling, who are not on screen, are doing shit, doing that. It's like the mob is acting in their own interest because you're not checking up on them, because you're also protecting them in a little bit of way because you're involved in this. And also, I've had to do so many Italian accents, and it's been so much fun. All Danny Zuko in some level, and Julia, who plays Val, is so kind to me about it. And it's like, oh, you think you're better than me? It's like, it's a lot of this. And Julia also let me name the guy who owns the pizza place where Val works at, Dominic Toretto V, which was really kind of
Oh my God.
Dom 5. He's Dom 5.
Incredible. Okay, we absolutely have to do at least a couple of questions.
Good. Yeah. I love the teacher in me is like, boom, yeah, I'll answer your study questions. Let's do it. In The Great Gatsby, it's also about the degradation of society. It's not just about riches. I got you.
Incredible. This first question comes to us from Kaylee. Thanks, Kaylee.
Hi, Kaylee.
Kaylee says, "Hi, I hope you are doing well. I am the DM/keeper for my family's Monster of the Week campaign, and I've started to make plans on how to end the campaign. What tips do you have for planning the end of a campaign and tying together the end of a story?" Kaylee, a great question.
Incredible question, Kaylee. Also, shout out for doing stuff for your family. That must be really tough, and I'm so proud of you. Ending a campaign, we've done that with campaign 1. We put a bow on it. The thing that I wish I had done was, and the thing that I do now, is explicitly ask my players what they want. Because again, that is not a spoiler. You can still give them in some surprise way what they want. It's like, what is your goal? What is something you want to accomplish by the end of this thing? And just make sure you hit that in some way, whatever the dice say, at least entertain that a little bit. Again, asking your players what they want is not bad. You can still surprise them. And I hope you do.
100%, truly. Remember that this is the part of the problem of the end is in any set, like you can have a session as a player where you're like a little bit of a wallflower, a little bit less this, you don't take the spotlight as much. But when you're wrapping up, there's not next week's session to come back and get a little bit more spotlight than you got last week. Like everyone's got to get their shots in. So like, I think, in Dimension 20, there have been some finales that, due to our shooting schedule, had to get rushed. And it's always heartbreaking for me because I want to give everybody so much spotlight to be like, no, like take as much time as you need for everything your character wants to do here at the end. Dimension 20 has been great in terms of part of doing an anthology season with these very short, max, 17, 18 episode seasons, sophomore year's 24 or 5, is that I've had to end stories over and over and over again. It's great practice. It's hard. It's hard. Because let me tell you something. I don't know if people are finding this out for the first time. Actual play, improvised. It's improvised.
Wait, what have I been doing with all these scripts around?
Oh my God. Oh. The idea of having to memorize a new 2-hour script every week. Good Lord. But the whole point of an ending is it's the payoff where everything that happened makes sense and it comes back and you go, wow, nothing was accidental. That's hard to do in a novel where literally nothing is accidental, let alone a multi-person collaborative, improvised, whatever. So I would say, maybe this is silly of me to say, but go easy on yourself. Making everything matter and everything pay off and everything come back when a lot of these decisions were made with like an empty bowl of Doritos in front of you and you're hungry and you're in a long combat and someone's on their phone, like it can be hard to make it all pay off.
Definitely the best part about doing a game by yourself is that it's not recorded and no one else will see it. So like, if you need to redo something, I'm not saying like fudging a roll necessarily, but like if you need to make a new choice or you want to rework a scene, absolutely do it. And like make sure that everyone is happy. Also do a schlocky anime ass epilogue, like one that's perfect for everyone. Just do it. You're going to love it. And like make all the jokes you want. Like, again, the thing that I'm now playing D&D like for fun. And I'm DMing still, but it's like nice to have reps where I don't need to come up with good names for stuff. And like it's been so nice to remember that like no one's going to see this and you're just doing it for your own enjoyment. So just remember that and be as saccharine and as silly as you want, especially for you and your fam.
Hell yes. I'm very light on prep for most of the time. Endings is a lot of prep. Endings, I will meticulously go back through all of the session notes. I will say, is there a beloved NPC somewhere that can pop up and say like, you left me in the mines, but I wanted to come say congratulations on beating this big bad person. Like that vibe can be very, very, it can be nice to give yourself a hand with those loose ends. This next one comes to us from Patrick. Thanks, Patrick.
Hi, Patrick.
I am running my first ever campaign, and the players are approaching the end of the short module. How would you recommend transitioning from a pre-written module to telling your own stories? Great question.
Great question. I will say I've never used a module before. Like I just kind of threw myself into the DMing deep end. Like my second time DMing, I had to come up with what I was doing on the fly because someone couldn't show up, and then I made one of my players cry because I touched. It was Julia, who was the same one who plays Val. I made her cry because it was a whole thing. It was a bit with Koatoa, and a god and a demigod was also her character's father. And I'm like, hey, maybe I'm good at this. So like I never got a chance to do the module. What I will say is, like, you could always just like start over. Like, don't feel like you need to continue. You could just take the characters and take all of the connective tissue and put it in a new world. That would be really fun for me. Like, the thing that always makes me bothered, and something that I love from other games like Fiasco, is that the relationships between the characters aren't established, and that's really difficult to deal with. But then you could always like just figure out, if you do want to do a homebrew world, like, you don't have to start in Phandalin and keep Phandalin in your world, because Phandalin's like fine. It's a fantasy. It's a little fantasy town. So like, feel free to just take everything and just put it in a new world. My advice is copy and paste.
I totally agree with that. Similarly, I tried to run a module one time. There's a whole anecdote about it in the very first episode of Adventuring Academy with me and Lou Wilson.
Yes.
It did not go well. It went off the rails immediately. And I think for me, there is always this. I have always looked at modules as sort of the ultimate form of preparation. And I think of them a lot in the way of like heavy armor and a tower shield. And you're protecting yourself with all of this stuff to insulate yourself against anything unexpected happening. But fundamentally, I feel like you are going to yield more results in the long run by being a dexterity-based fighter. You're going to yield more results in the long run by, and this is, listen, people are welcome to disagree with me. When I have tried to run modules, even I ran a module recently, and I was like flop sweating the whole time. It's like I was panicked because I was like, oh God, do I remember that PDF told me to do something? What did that PDF want me to do? And all it does in my eyes is like keep me from listening to my players and seeing where their interest is right now in this moment at the table. So I would say that the way to transition is to realize you only ever need to know the next thing to say. You don't need to know what's happening in 2 or 3 things, because again, your players will inform a lot of that. Your players will like watching their interest will help you create what the next steps are going to be. Make up as much as makes you feel comfortable, and then improvise the rest. I realize this could be terrible. This might, I hope I'm not doing an easy for me to say kind of thing of like, as someone who took 10 years of improv classes, just make it up. Next question. But I feel that the soil is richer in that place where you are collaborating more with your players and following their focus and interest and letting that guide your creativity.
I always agree with that. I mean, how can you improv how can you make up the McCringle in the behind the soda shop if it's written to be like, if they go behind the soda shop, tell them not to because there's nothing there. Like, those are your training wheels. Like, you got it, man. Like, I believe in you. Again, it feels a little easy for you to say, but like, truly, let your fiction flag fly.
Ooh, let your fiction flag fly. I love it. Possible episode name. This next one comes to us from Spellbreaker. Thanks, Spellbreaker.
Hi, Spellbreaker.
Woo!
Woo!
Woo! How do you build your world before session 0, and how do you modify it based on PC backstories and details? Love this question. And obviously, Eric, you've already gone into a really cool process, like involving a quiet year and other stuff that I feel like is extremely dope. But let's just shout out for a second the assumption baked into this question of you should modify your world after the PCs get built, which is like, not everybody does that. That's perfect.
Good. Good job. Good job with your assumption of your question already. You're fine. Next question. It was inside of you the entire time.
The magic was in you the whole time. 1,000,000%. Yeah, well, I think that there's an interesting thing here. And I'd be interested in hearing both for your home games and for Join the Party, because Join the Party has that's an incredibly beautiful, that would be so much fun to do a quiet year to build the setting together. For me, there is this two-part world building. There's world building before the PCs are there and world building after the PCs are there. But for me, even at those points, it all centers around the PCs, because what I'm doing when I'm building the world, like when I'm telling my friends, I got a new campaign setting I'm cooking up, in that moment, all I'm trying to do is say, I'm going to make some shit that will make my friends go ooh and ah. I'm just making some shit that they will think, how cool, how fun. And I also, from my LARP writing background, I remember my brother and I used to write LARPs together, and one of the things we would sort of say when we were writing LARPs was every single team background, every single group background, the players should read it and go, oh my God, we're the coolest people in the game. Who could be? And I think when you're doing a campaign setting, for me, if it's classic fantasy, it's look at all these fantastical factions and academies and port cities and places that oh, I want to make a character from every single place in this world, from every single background, from every single thing, how cool it all is, right? You're in that pre-world building, you're just making toys. You're just making toys that people would want to play with.
The way that I think of it is imagine you're an architect and you build a house, and a house has 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a backyard, and maybe a fire, space for a fire pit, right? Then the people move in and they're like, oh, actually the 3rd bedroom is actually going to be a study and a library. And the fire, we're not actually going to use the fire pit. We're actually going to make this whole thing a pool in the backyard. And then imagine the people who moved in the house call up the architect, and it was like, hey, how do we make this room more like a library or a study? And then you're like, oh, I can actually help you with that. I can install shelves for you. I can do that. It's just like that. And you won't know what they want to do with the house until they move into the house. And then you're inviting the architect back in, and the people who live there and the architect get to do it together.
A beautiful analogy. I think it's exactly correct. I think that and then after, like you're saying, once the PCs have moved in, to me, I actually tend to not go anywhere towards the plot until after character creation. For me, what it is it's prior to PCs, you're building the house, you're building the beautiful things in it, and all you're thinking is have I put enough stuff in here that people will be excited to move into this house? Is there enough stuff basically to inspire people? Because if you just say it's a fantasy world, who do you want to be? You leave your PCs being huh? I don't know, yeah. Right? You make enough stuff that someone says got an idea for a character. And then after that, that's when I start to think about villains, schemes, forces at work in the world. Now that we know who our main characters are, what are the forces pursuing them, opposing them, thwarting them, assisting them, inspiring them? Because even though that can feel a little wild, by doing that, you ensure that you aren't making your PCs peripheral, that you are not making there should be, and we were saying, to go back to the whole hegemony we're talking about with D&D, one of the many problems that D&D faces is by virtue of creating these preset modules that can invite any group of people. You include a moral in your storytelling, which is any group of 6 strangers can fix the problems of a strange land, provided they're violent enough.
Yeah.
And here's the problem. I don't have any problem with violence in storytelling. Hey, fight the good fight. I'm not a pacifist, but by building your world around your players, you can assure that they are kind of like at the center of the world and the right people to be the heroes of that world.
Right, because Dungeons & Dragons requires they are the heroes and they do the violence, which is fine. If you don't want that, do a different game, but like that is the requisite of the game that we're playing here. So I 100% agree with that. I think that's great. It's more like give a summary of the world you want to do and the things you're talking about, and then have your players ask questions about it, and then which will flesh out plot hooks, then characters, then make the map. I feel like it's like a 3-step process. Like first values, then characters, then map.
Yes. I love that. I really, really love that. This next question comes to us from our friend Queenie. Thanks, Queenie.
Hi, Queen.
Thank you.
Sorry, I thought you were doing woo the entire time.
Woo. Queenie asks, how do you reward good role playing without punishing Shire players or players who have a different style of playing?
Oh, get up and hug them and tell them you love them deeply. And looking at their eyes and being like, I'm enjoying this so much. That you make my life more complete after all the work I've done. Congratulations, we're best friends now. Is that what you said?
Oh my God.
I think that the question that you're asking is Shire players. Shire and people who have different styles than you. I'm gonna put the people who have different styles than you because that's like feels like a real judgment call to you, and like you should reward them because I'm sure that they're trying if they are trying in fact. Shire players still role play and do things that surprise you, and like I think that if you treat it's like you can't hold everyone to the same standard, but you should have them all jump and really do their strength. Like if role play means so many different things. It can mean cracking a joke at the right time. It can mean like an extended emotional monologue. It's like, hey, instead of doing a persuasion roll, convince me. Like there are so many different ways for you to do that like reward them. There are so like a good. I think your idea of good is like you're holding yourself to just like they need to be great improvers and fucking smash it. Like I don't think that that's necessarily it. And I think that maybe you're holding yourself to D&D media standards, which it's just like don't do that from us. Don't do that. So like I think that I'm quibbling with a different part of your question about it. I think that like you reward everyone by loving them and telling them that they're great, but like the parameters in which they are great might be a little bit different for everybody else. But I'm sure everyone is contributing and doing their best and making this a happier place to be.
I fully agree. I think there's that kernel of like hot take. Here's a hot take.
Do it. Get in the comments already. Get in the comments right.
Hey, get in the comments.
I feel like I said the secret word and woke up your cat.
Whoa! Oh, my cat. Oh, Metallica's been in the show the whole time.
It's been beautiful. Oh, I thought that was just a thing. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ruin the magic.
No, Metallica, you're in the vodcast. Do you know?
You're crushing it.
He's crushing it right now. He's incredible. That cat is like 21 years old, and he's a spry boy. Still, he's very healthy. Oh, big yawn. Hot take. As the opposite of a Shire player, Shire player. We talking Frodo Baggins? Let's go. Metallica hated it.
We ruined it. We scared the cat away.
As a non-Shire player, here's something. I've never incorporated inspiration into 5th edition D&D into any time I've played it. I understand why it's there. One of the things I dislike about it is it's one of the only non-diegetic rules. This is a big conversation about game design I could go into. One of the things I think is a strength of games like Dungeons and Dragons and other crunchier tabletops is the preponderance of rules that are diegetic, meaning the character also knows how many spells they have in their spell book. The fighter might not know that it's called Second Wind, but they know that they can dig deep down and get past an injury every so often as long as they've had a rest. They know it deep down. They have an understanding that they have that ability, right? And inspiration is non-diegetic. It's not existing in the world. It's a reward from the aristocrats in the box watching the game. It's from us, the audience of the game, going, that move is good. And first of all, I'm always worried as a DM, because if I give inspiration, what does it mean when I don't? Like, I give it to this player for a joke, but what about when you make a joke to it and I don't give it to you? And I worry as an improviser, because we're trained not to make judgment calls like that. So, and another weird thing is, and I know this is interesting because there are a lot of games that believe that they are more pro storytelling because they incentivize role playing. But there are things as a role player that I find crass about attempting to commercialize my love of role playing. Like, I don't want a token when I do the role playing. I'm doing that because I like it. Don't pay me for doing it.
Brennan, I'm going to give you 2 tokens, 2 conversations. I really like that answer, but I'm taking one away because I disagree with you. And I can demonstrate that I disagree with your character. No, I 100% agree with you. I agree with that. That's why I was only joking a little bit when I said, tell your players you love them and they're doing a good job. That's the only way to do it. It's about persons, like, outside of the game. Thank you for doing what you did. That was awesome. I'm 5,000% compliments. Write them down. Put them in a note and give it to your friend.
That's exactly what I mean. Like, positive reinforcement amongst friends is the love and friendship that we are there at the table to cultivate in the first place. I think that for me, within the question is this idea of like rewarding good role playing. And I think my only point is I've never needed my role playing to be rewarded. Like, the player at the table that is more theatrical and is more invested in their character, that's probably the high that they are here chasing already. Like, in the same way, it would be like, it would be like if there was someone in my life who every time I ate a delicious slice of pizza, they were like, here's a token as a reward for eating that delicious slice of pizza. It's like, baby, the pizza was the reward. I don't need a pizza token. I don't need to be rewarded for this.
Brad, taking another token away for using pizza, because you're really reminding me that I don't have pizza right here, and I just need to demonstrate that in the game that we're playing.
Listen, you are in Brooklyn right now. You and I both know who of us could get a better slice of pizza in the next.
Look at me and Lugosh are going to Pauly G. Absolutely.
Oh my God.
Day of pulling bullets out of mobsters and helping folks transition, and we're gonna get some Moz slices from the Pauly G slice shop. Absolutely.
I'm so jealous. Mr. Eric Silver, join the party. People know where to find you. What are your social handles? Where can people go and find your work?
Wonderful. You can find me on Twitter at L_Silvero, EL_SILVERO. My name, if I was a Lucha Libre wrestler. You can find Join the Party on Twitter at Join the Party Pod, and on Instagram at the same handle, and you can find it wherever podcasts are sold. You can find the article. I think, if I remember correctly, it's Dungeons and Dragons has an anti-Semitism problem on Alma, which is like Jewish teen Vogue, and I mean that in the best goddamn way possible. I love them so much. And you can follow my games. I think I put them on itch, and they're on my website, ericsilver.work. But you can also find No Capes through the Join the Party merch store, which is jointhepartypod.com/merch.
Incredible. Once again, thanks to our amazing guest, Eric Silver, and to all of you watching at home, we say thank you, and we will catch you next time on Adventuring Academy. Farewell!
Goodbye!